Well, welcome, Craig. It is so nice to have you on Travel Connections. You are my first episode of season 3, and I'm super excited that you're here with me. Thank you.
Well, hello, Suzanne. It's good to be here. Now I get to see what goes on behind the curtain.
That's right. That's right. Well, this is kind of new for us. You have always been a big supporter of the podcast and of Adventures of Empty Nesters, my blog, and we have traveled to on many of the same trips, obviously, but you've not been a guest on Travel Connections.
I have not, and I feel honored, but I don't think it's a big a surprise that we've traveled together. I live with you, but
This is true. This is true.
Yeah.
I know. I know. Well, did you know that this is part 1 of a 3-part series all about our trip to Africa? And I decided to do this because there was so much content and so many amazing people to talk about and to talk with that it just couldn't be contained in one episode. So the name of our tour was called The Wilderness of Southern Africa Safari by Land and by Water. And we were guests of Collette. And we both have traveled with Collette before. We went to Iceland and I went to Japan with them. And it was amazing. So thank you for being here to talk about this for the first time on the podcast. But let's start with the idea that Africa is such a bucket list destination. What do you think about that?
Yeah, it's interesting. When you talked about doing multiple parts, there's so much that was packed into 2 weeks. You could have had 10 parts, but I understand why you can't. I think that the whole idea of Africa, you go there because you want to see the wildlife that you've read about and that you see on the internet and in film. And I think, as we'll get to, when you leave, you realize that you've been affected deeply in other ways beyond that. But certainly the whole trip itself is phenomenal. You mentioned Iceland. That was always one of my top 5 trips of all time, and Collette was clearly behind that. You look at this trip, and it's number one. And we're still glowing about this 60 days later.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, I don't really recall a trip or tour that we have taken that we are continually reflecting, continually talking about what we just did. Do you agree with that?
100%.
It was just, there was so much. And I think it was so special that I just wanted to keep reliving it.
Right. It's one of those trips you hated to see it end. And so you're looking forward now at future trips and thinking about how to bring some of the same people along.
I know.
Strangers coming into it, right?
I know. Well, what do you think? You've only been on a small number of tours. You've been on Viking, you've been on Collette tours. What do you think of the whole small group tour experience in general?
Yeah, I mean, I have to caveat that the idea of being with thousands on an ocean cruise does not appeal to me.
No, me neither. I know.
But when you look at the intimacy of this, I don't think I understood going in that there'd be less than 20 people.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I understood on day one of meeting them at the opening dinner that I'd really enjoy spending time with all of them throughout the trip. And I think what's really cool about having a small group like that is it gives you the chance to get even closer to people. And if you think about it, you naturally start to pair off with people that you've hit it off with. And so when you look at the way that a safari is put together, you start to realize that you gravitated towards these same people. We had our little pack of 6. We'd get on the safaris together. We'd go to dinner together. We'd drink gin and tonics together. And it just made an unbelievably more meaningful experience.
Well, it's true. And when you are in very large groups, I think your experience is very different. You do break off, like I can only really compare with Viking when you'd be on your own 50-person bus, and you would go on your excursions. It was actually fine. It just didn't feel as intimate as this particular tour did. I felt like we were experiencing something so special with, 16 other people. And that was it in the whole world. And we were in our own little bubble.
Well, and I think the difference here too is the way that the film crew worked on the Iceland trip versus us being embedded in with the group on this trip It made it a lot more accessible. It made it more natural. I think when you add on to that, the fact that the tour guides on both trips were just out of this world, unbelievable people. It just shows the quality that Collette attracts.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, Collette, they've been in business over 100 years. I I am a huge fan. I am a fangirl of Collette, not because they've taken me on amazing trips, but they do it so well. Every detail on this tour was incredible. And it became kind of a running joke that every day you go, this is the best day. And it was like day one, it was the best day. I talk with Samantha in the next episode, and here we are. We're leaving the airport. We're on a bus, right? And we're coming from the airport, and we're going to Zimbabwe or Botswana, excuse me. And we see these elephants off the side of the road. And I think that's the coolest darn thing I've ever seen in my whole life. Little did I know that we were going to have so many elephant experiences. But I could have gone home right then once I saw that off the tour bus. You know what I mean?
Right. And everyone on the bus was busy taking pictures out the bus window.
Right.
6 hours later, you're 10 feet from a pride of lions. So you're right. Every day, every half day topped the prior. What you out of that story is that same tour guide managed multiple men into moving buses and wrecked trucks to get our bus through the sand to continue on time. So just amazing.
It is. That's a whole side story. Let's talk about a typical day on safari, because I want people to know what it really feels like how early we get up, and that you want to take it and you want to describe what it feels like to go on a safari day.
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, if you look at the fact that we were in game parks in both Botswana and Zimbabwe, and they were different in their own ways for many reasons. Mm-hmm. If you think a typical day of safari is maybe different than what you envision going into it, but you wake up, you have a group breakfast, you board the Jeeps, and you go, and you're out early, 7:30, 8 o'clock. And
earlier than that.
Was it? Yeah.
Yeah, it was like 6 a.m.
Was it really? Yeah. But you were with these animals in their natural habitat. Mm-hmm. And, just to see that twice a day minimally, and then maybe that evening take a river cruise, which is going through wildlife like crocodiles and hippopotamus and everything else. I mean, just incredible to see everything. But so it's just a structured process of eating on time. Food's a big part of the tour. Of spending time on different safari excursions, and then the river cruises, which just make it an amazing experience.
Well, that's what I love about, I didn't really understand how significant being on water would be. I didn't realize you could get that much closer to the animals and still stay very safe. But so we did that in the beginning of the trip, and I'm kind of photo heavy in the beginning of the trip because I just couldn't believe my eyes. We would get up, and on that very first day, we saw a lioness within 20 minutes of driving into the park. And then it just goes on from there. And then you see gazelles and giraffes and hippopotamus and lions. You want to tell your lion story?
Yeah, I think the first evening, I know you didn't feel well. I went out with the group. I asked the guide, what's the gun you bring to protect us? And he looked at me and shook his head like I was out of my mind. We don't need a gun. It's perfectly safe. Yet I'm leaning out of the Jeep 10, 12 feet from a pride of lions who've just feasted on an elephant. Mm-hmm. And it's completely unnerving to think that I'm this close to these animals that can completely devour me. Yet the guide is not the least bit. He's sitting on the edge of the Jeep explaining how they behave, right? It's way beyond anything you've ever experienced in your life.
Well, these guides are so professional, and they have to go to a lot of schooling, number one. Yeah. Number two, then they have years, decades of experience. They know exactly what the animals are doing. They know where they are. They communicate with each other. They know, seeing the kill was it was interesting for me. It was like a circle of life, and it was reality. This is not some bougie, made up kind of safari where we take, portable toilets with us. This is like real. You are seeing these animals in their native habitat.
Right.
And again, the water is so significant because this was the dry season, which I really loved, by the way, that all the leaves are off the trees. And so you can see the animals so much clearer. And so you would kind of go and hang out at different water holes. And that's when you would see these magnificent animals.
But, it's interesting. Here we go again. We're talking about the animals.
Right.
It was completely just mind blowing.
Mm-hmm.
But what really makes the trip is the people.
Mm-hmm.
And you talk about Samantha, who was the tour guide, who's just off the charts amazing. You look at the guides we had on safari, who are incredible in their knowledge and in their ability to work with the people and run the tour. And then you look at the local people that you'd meet as you go into town or in the restaurants. And it's amazing how wonderful these people are. And it's amazing how they view life and the world and how they survive in it. And it really makes you appreciate them and appreciate what you have at home.
Well, two things to add on to that. When I talked with Samantha was so good about giving us statistics. So as you're going along, you are getting statistics on all kinds of things, local things, government things about animals. But what she said is that for every tourist that comes to Africa, 7 jobs are created. So of course, they're going to be so excited. They are so grateful for us to visit. And I asked her, what can we do? What can we do? And she's like, spread the word. Tell people that we are waiting for them in Africa. Yeah. And didn't you feel that way? And do you remember the young woman that we met in that very first, you want to tell the story, in that very first stop? It was not too far from our hotel in Botswana.
Yeah. I think that woman had such an effect on you and I, because it was the first of a herd of wooden figurines that you purchased on this trip.
Yes, and I did.
I think we purchased 3 from her, and maybe the total was like $16, and I gave her a 20. And she cried and she said, "This will feed my family for the whole week." And it really checks your ego when you realize we just take this for granted. We're rounding this up naturally. And to them, it's life-changing. And I think you may edit out what I'm about to say, but I'm a big LA Dodger fan. I've spent the last 13 years rooting for Clayton Kershaw. I know that his biggest charity has been working with African countries that were underprivileged. I'm not sure exactly which one. Uh-huh. But I can tell you that I always criticized personally, why not help the inner city where you play?
Right.
When you go and you experience this, it was an awakening for me. And that here's a group of people that have less opportunity to overcome what we do here in this country. I'm not making a political statement or social statement.
No, I understand.
I'm just saying these people have far less opportunity to pull themselves up by the bootstrap, if you will. Mm-hmm. And yet they do, whether they're going hours every morning from home to sell their wares in a public market, whatever they have to do, they're doing it to survive and feed their family. And it really impacted me.
It touched my heart. It absolutely touched my heart. And yes, I brought home a lot of wooden animal figurines and bulls and things, but that was their primary source of income. So I wanted to purchase them, and they were so grateful and so happy to share the story behind the little animal or behind the bull. And I love them. Now I have kind of a little Africa altar in our family room. But you know what? It makes me happy. It brings me back to these people that we met that I will never forget. Yeah. I told you just as we were talking about the podcast, Africa changed me forever.
Yeah. Right. Well, and I'll tell you, a woman that I work with was so enthralled by following you on social media that she and her husband have now booked through Collette this tour. And I think it's for those same reasons. And she asked all those questions, like, is it safe? Very safe. People like,
right.
And been there now, I feel so much more qualified to understand it and represent what it's all about. But
exactly. Well, next, so we talked about what a typical day was like on safari. Oh, let's touch on the fact that if you go on a morning drive, I loved this so much. They would bring these like camping card tables, but they were cool. They weren't like, they were just like really stylish. And we would have tea and muffins, and we'd be like by the water, and we'd all kind of stretch our legs. There's usually about 6 of us in each Jeep, and we get out and we'd stretch our legs or whatever. But then in the afternoon, would you like to share what sometimes happens in the afternoon? That was so fun.
I didn't know you were going to go there. As I'm listening,
Yeah.
I'm laughing because you're, quote, such a girl. You focused on the equipment, and no, we're not going to buy that equipment because we'll never do it.
Yeah, but it was so cute.
Cute. I think for the men and some of the women, the same vibe in the afternoon drive was a gin and tonic stop. So as much as you enjoyed your tea, having a couple of gin and tonics in the bush, surrounded by wildlife,
come on,
something you just can't repeat here on any level. Yeah, very.
I know. Well, we could talk about the Cape Buffalo experience, because that kind of feeds into the gin and tonic thing. So we are on, this is at Iganyana, which was a remarkable experience. This is the luxury tented camp, which was in the middle of our trip. And we'll talk about that in a minute, but let's talk about this last game drive. So it's in the afternoon, and what do we stumble upon? I will let you take it from here.
It's funny, you and I have a differing view of that experience. So
okay.
I'm going to go I'd like to go last. You should go into more detail because it was more profound for you.
Okay. Well, it was profound for me because number one, we learned while we were there that the Cape Buffalo, which is one of the big 5, we saw everything but a rhinoceros, by the way, because they're very hard to find. The Cape Buffalo is the most dangerous. And we actually had the pleasure of meeting many of them in several locations in several countries. So we're driving along and we looked right, and there's probably 600. I don't know. There's a lot of them, and they're all lined up, and they're dark, and they have these horns that look like their hair is parted in the center and that it becomes a horn. I don't know. I think they're very cartoonish looking. Anyways, I was absolutely terrified because if they decided to charge, we were goners. However, our guide is sitting there, he's talking with us, and I'm like, I think we should go. I think we should go. He knew we were totally safe. But at the end of that, we come around the corner and we drive up, and they have prepared this whole feast of appetizers and gin and tonics and a portable toilet. It was just amazing. And then the Cape Buffalo came up right where we were. We were in a totally different location. So what are you going to add to that? I thought that was a pretty good description.
No, look, it's no secret I'm a city boy, and you were far more brave in some situations than I was. But in this particular one, where our path converged with the Cape Buffalo.
Right.
I wasn't the least bit worried about this one. This is the one time you were the most concerned.
This was the one time. We're getting to the next one.
I think that we're bigger than them because they see the vehicle we're in.
Right.
I found it to be amazing. What was really incredible is the standoff.
Yes, that's right.
And we wouldn't leave.
Right.
And you do reach the point where, okay, it is time to go.
Yeah.
But you're not exaggerating. There were hundreds of these, hundreds. And it's just an amazing experience.
And we had to cross their paths. So they were going in front of us. That was their path. Yeah. And so we had to wait for them or go. And they were like watching us, like they would take like 2 steps and then they would stop, and they would take 2 steps and they would stop. And I'm like, oh my God. But we were fine. And our guides were taking care of us. Yeah. Let's talk a little bit more about Iganyana, because that was an almost indescribable experience. So it's a tented camp. And in this tented camp, there are cement foundations, but the tent comes all the way down to the ground. And it was like luxury, but not super luxurious, but super cool with an infinity pool and a big area where you have like director's chairs and a big fire pit. And to me, when we walked up to Inganyana, that was like that's what I thought Africa was going to be like. Did you have that? Did you have that same impression or no?
100%.
Yeah.
I think when you pull up, this is far more what you envision the African experience to be.
Mm-hmm.
The local chant and songs they're doing when you pull up to
Mm-hmm.
just be total environment. But you're right. When people think tents, I don't know what glamping really is, but
Yeah.
they're like nice tents
Yeah.
with cement foundations, bathrooms inside.
Yeah.
This is far different than people might expect them to be.
Yeah. It was lovely.
Yeah.
So do you want to paint the story, paint the picture of the elephants?
Yeah. I think we had two incredibly close, we'll call them interactions with different species in this camp.
Yes, we did.
The first night there, the group is sitting in an arc in these director chairs talking, and the grounds are cordoned off by what it's not really a fence, it's a stack of twigs, branches.
Well, they're big.
Yeah, the whole thing is like 3 feet tall at most. And we're sitting there, and as the sun set, people are going around the group saying, here's who I am, here's where I'm from, here's what I do. It's great to get to know people better.
Yeah.
I would say we're 3/4 through that. The sun is starting to really set, and we realize that a herd of elephant have come up within 10 feet of us and are just standing there looking at us.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, they will stomp you to death. This is crazy to be here. And I think for me, being a city boy, I was completely taken back by it at first.
Mm-hmm.
And then as you continue to stand there and experience them, you become very comfortable with it. I think I became naively overly brave with this. It's almost like you think you could pet their trunk, which you can't.
I know.
Right? And then all of a sudden, one of them shrieked, as you've heard in the movies. And
it's the trumpet sound.
I ran like I was on fire. Terry, the camp owner and director, just tells me you can't do that. You got to just stand.
He's like, dude, no.
Right?
Shh. No.
That's the last thing to do. Well, whatever. They can stomp all you to death. I'm out of here. Right? But it was pretty funny. But then if you fast forward, half hour, 45 minutes later at dinner, you and I are sitting in the pool. Your legs are in the pool while the elephant's drinking out of it. This just doesn't happen.
No.
It doesn't. Incredible. No. Incredible.
It doesn't happen in your lifetime, in anyone's lifetime. And yes, you know what? That trumpeting was scary, and you did slow down and stuff, and my heart was beating so fast. And Terry had said to me, "Give me your camera," and he said, "Go put your feet in the pool." And I'm like, "Oh, I don't think I can do that."
Yeah, that's
he
right.
says, "Yes, you can." I'm like, "Okay." So I do, and I go and I sit down, and there is a distance there. An elephant would have never been able to, the way it was situated, wouldn't have done it, but you wouldn't have been able to hurt me. But they were so close. And then you joined me, and I thought, my gosh, Craig, look what this travel experience has done for us.
1 in a million.
It's just exactly 1 in a million.
Yeah.
Well, okay. So unfortunately, there's so much to talk about. I have to now go speeding through the rest of my questions for you. But was there something surprising about the trip, or did we cover it, or is there something that maybe that we haven't touched on that you wanted to talk about?
Yeah, I think we have always planned what are the trips we want to take. Africa's been on our radar for 20, 25 years. Mm-hmm. And I think the LA Times had a story about a giraffe encounter at a place in Kenya, and that got our attention. And, when we finally were able to make this happen, I think, as I said earlier, my expectations were exceeded on every level, but I was as touched, if not more so, by the people than the wildlife. Mm-hmm. And I think, the way they live, to spend a luncheon with a local woman and her family, to get to know people like this, it's just something like you'll never forget. And I just left touched. And it's the kind of thing, there's so many Americans who don't get out of the country to see the rest of the world. And
Mhm.
I would just say get out and do it because it gives you a really valuable perspective.
I totally agree with you. And, this leads me, we hadn't talked about talking about this, but I want to. We visited a camp. We went to an area called Lake Kariba. Part of our trip was on a houseboat, but it's not like a typical boat. It had 20 bedrooms on it, but and the crew makes food and you kind of travel. Lake Kariba is the largest man-made lake in the world, second largest. I'm close with those statistics, right?
Right. I think it's
Okay.
the least largest in the African continent. Let's go
Well,
with that.
certainly.
Yeah.
Okay. You're right. I'll go with that.
Yeah.
It's very large. But part of this, on one of the days, we took a smaller boat from the houseboat, and we went to an island where this group of people live. And my initial reaction, truthfully, is I'm thinking, I'm going to cry. I'm not going to be able to handle it. There's going to be little kids running at me, and I'm not going to be able to handle this, right? Because Samantha had said the kids love this. They love it when we visit, and they're going to all come running to the boat. And I'm thinking in my head, oh boy, this is going to be hard. It was magic. These kids, these aren't sad, starving children. These were wonderful, excited children to meet these Americans, white people. I mean, they don't see them. That is not part of their everyday life. And then to hold their hands, they wanted to hold our hands all the time. Your hands were never empty. My hands were never empty. And then they took us on a tour and they showed us how they made the bricks for their huts. And anyways, you embellish, help me with this.
No, I think that you look at a village that their commerce that supports them solely is fishing.
Correct.
And so when you go, I think you had the imagery of like a UNICEF commercial,
Right.
all very familiar with. And
Correct.
that condition exists, certainly, but not
Yes.
not in this case.
Right.
And to go there and to see how these people survive in kind of an area that they've just taken over, to see that they have a self-imposed government, if you will.
Mhm.
We met with the elders and the leader of the camp, and just before and when we left. I
Mhm.
think to see the reaction of the children, it's also a great experience to be an extreme minority, right?
Mhm.
Because to your point, it's not, although they're used to seeing this nowadays,
Now.
it's still rare. And
Mhm.
it's really an amazing experience on every emotional level.
I loved it.
Yeah.
I haven't talked that much to other people about going to Victoria Falls, which is one of the 7 natural wonders of the world. I think I've wanted to see Victoria Falls the first time I ever heard it exist.
Yeah.
As a child, I wanted to see Victoria Falls, and then we got to see it. And I absolutely was in awe of it. I couldn't believe how close we could get.
Yeah. And again, you mentioned we were there in the dry season. My understanding is you're in the rainy season, you're going to see a whole different environment, right? But no, the power, the size, the magnitude of the falls, just beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
And the town itself, awesome town. The hotel, incredible,
Yeah.
right? So it just really made, and honestly, the gin and tonic in the Victorian Hotel is
The
the
Victoria Falls Hotel.
I don't know how we'll ever recreate that drink, but it was amazing. Yeah. So
Well, I'm hoping to. I'm hoping to recreate that drink. That was kind of a side thing that I didn't know that we were going to have the time to do. And you do get some free time while you're on these tours to do other things, but most of the time you're not in a city. You're out in camp somewhere. But I did drag you to high tea at Victoria Falls Hotel, which was built in 1904. And the design was incredible. It was like out of a movie. I'm sure they've used it for movies, but it did come with a spectacular gin and tonic that we'd never seen before. So I felt like I redeemed myself. I appreciated you going.
I don't want to say anything negative about high tea. So yeah.
Oh, so we better move on because you don't want to say anything negative. Okay. Um, you've touched on this already several times, and I just want to make sure that we get the opportunity to say to other travelers, don't wait, right? I mean, is there any other thing about Africa that you would like to share that you haven't had the opportunity to share it?
think people probably view that the flight is difficult or because of the distance,
Mhm.
they may think that it's not accessible. And I would argue back that at least the two countries that we visited, you
Mhm.
couldn't have asked for more of the opposite. And so I
Mhm.
think that if it's on your radar, I think you want to go and go as soon as you can. I tell everybody that. Yeah, I think it seems that with maturity or age, people are freer to travel more. And,
Mhm.
and I understand that, but I also know that life is really short, and this is such an amazing place to visit that I
Mhm.
would say go now. You'll be blown away by the people, by the animals, and the entire experience.
No, I completely agree with you. And while we were there, Cal, who works with Collette, was busy filming the entire experience. And that was a blast because he was able to capture things that, were in the moment. And he was capturing so much content. I have no idea how he's going to put this into, multiple videos, but they're going to be splashed everywhere. I'm excited.
But if you look at what he did on short notice for the last night that we were there to put a
Oh,
vignette together, I
that's
have no doubt that
right.
what he's crafting will be incredible.
I
Guy was
know.
amazing to work with.
So our final dinner was at this magical resort with lights in the trees and oh my gosh, and beautiful locals that were singing and that they were dancing and it was absolutely glorious. But prior to us going to dinner, Cal surprised us all with this whole this slideshow of all of us. Oh my gosh, it brought everyone to tears. It was like no one wanted to leave. I have never had that experience where you're like, well, wait, can we stay longer?
I think I agree with you. I think everyone there got along incredibly well. I know a lot of them now follow you on social media. Look, it's just a once in a lifetime experience, and I think the mantra is go and go now.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I sure appreciate you talking with me again about this. We do it at home all the time, next to my African altar.
You never stop talking at home, so that's okay.
No,
That's
no,
okay.
I never do stop talking at home, but at least I don't know. It's nice for me to take you out in public and introduce you to everyone because I appreciate your insight and you do presentations and all this kind of thing all the time, but I've never invited you here, and I just appreciate you doing this and taking the time to share what you thought about Africa.
Well, I appreciate doing it with you. I'm proud of what you're doing here. It's great. And I'll tell you, the thing that has to be said is a big thank you to Collette because it's a class organization, amazing people. As you said, you've had three experiences with them. I've now had two. And there's just nothing that they don't consider in advance. It's well worth every minute spent with them. So
That's
thank you to
wonderful.
them. Thank you to you.
Well, thank you, my dear. And I will see you downstairs. Bye.